It's great to see you here this afternoon or evening, depending on where you are in the country. Thanks for joining our youth block. We're really excited about these two different groups that I think are gonna really feed off of each other and give everybody some really great ideas on how to work with our youth. And so I'm going to go ahead and just introduce you very quickly to our presenters. We've got Natalie Shepp, and Natalie's the program coordinator for the Arizona 4-H Healthy Living Ambassadors, which shout out won a youth leadership award last year. And so good for them. And so she created this program in 2012 to encourage young people to practice personal wellness and promote those concepts within their communities. And in 2019, the 4-Hers chose to focus on the topic of mental health resources in schools, especially for LGBTQ plus youth. And these young people found success in that goal and are now focused on creating more inclusive environments in 4-H. And Natalie is joined by Ben and Fiona. Both, let's see, Fiona is a former 4-H member and college student, and Ben is a current 4-H member and high school student. And then the other half of our group is Sienna Popiel. And Sienna's a senior at Bozeman High School and the president of the Sexuality and Gender Alliance Club. And they are a member of the debate team and an intern at Forward Montana. And Sarah Jones Popiel is the mother of 2 teenagers and has a degree in human development and family studies and a minor in psychology from the University of Utah. So welcome to all of you. This is a great group, and you can read more about all of our presenters on the website. And I'm just gonna turn it over to you.
All right, hi guys. So this is our presentation on our project of the Alliance of Queer Education. Next slide, please. So our team on today is me and Ben. So my name's Fiona van Haren. My pronouns are she and her. And I got involved in this equity work because I wanted to help make Tucson and 4-H a more inclusive place for everybody, especially because I spent 5 years in 4-H and my entire life in Tucson. Both of these places are incredibly important to me, and I wanted to be able to make these spaces safe and inclusive for everybody. Ben, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Ben. I use he, him pronouns, and I got involved in this work just because I want to be the best ally I can be, and I think this was the best place to go. I'm cisgender and heterosexual, and I use he, him pronouns, but I'm not. But I know a lot. But basically, I just want to be the best ally I could possibly be to my friends and other members of my community who I saw were not getting equal treatment to me.
Hi, my name is Natasha. I use she, her pronouns. And I really got involved with this work because at first it was kind of focused around schools, and personally I had been experienced quite a bit of discrimination in my school and seen my friends go through even much worse. And I really wanted to make a difference in my community and to kind of take something that was really weighing on me and turn it into something positive.
So our group, this is just a small piece of our group who's a part of this project. We call it AQE. We are a group of activists from all across Arizona. Right now, it's just Pima and I think it's, Santa Cruz County. But we're hoping to reach as many people as possible and maybe expand next year. We'll see where this project takes us. So all of us are members of the 4-H Healthy Living Ambassador Club. So this is a 4-H club in Tucson. that focuses on teaching youth about how to be healthy and active members in their community. We do this through promoting community service, leadership, learning, and activism. And AQE is a perfect example of this goal of 4-H Healthy Living Ambassadors. Go ahead, Ben.
All right, so this actually started in the fall of 2019, so a year and a half ago, as a youth action project. So essentially, this was, still within our 4-H Healthy Living Ambassador Club. And this project was formed with the idea being that we wanted to make some sort of positive impact in our community, but how we wanted to make that impact, who we wanted to help, what we wanted to help, anything was totally up in the air. The idea was just to make a positive impact. And so with weekly meetings, we spent probably at least a month, perhaps longer, trying to figure out what we were interested in. So we did, who we wanted to help. And so we did, we made resource maps for our community to try to identify where various resources were for people in our community, try to identify places where resources were absent. And we looked for both positive and negative influencers in our community. And then we each got a chance to talk about things we were passionate about. And we even drew maps of our areas to try to identify where things were and who might be missing access to what resource and stuff like that. And so then eventually, after weeks of deliberation, we zeroed in on the idea of we want to focus on LGBTQ plus inclusivity in our school district, Tucson Unified School District. And so at this time, this project was only Tucson was only involved. We only had 2 people from Tucson, Arizona in our project because Tucson is in Pima County. And since it was pre-COVID, we were in person. And now since switching online, like the 4-H Healthy Living Ambassador Club has now been offered statewide, which has been a small plus. So now we can expand our impact a little bit. But so prior to this year, this project was restricted largely to people living in the Tucson area. But so anyways, our goal was to create a significant shift in school cultures and our school culture to become more welcoming of all students and to make an equitable and comfortable environment for all of our peers and everyone in the community, not just students, but staff, and basically anyone who stepped foot onto our TUSD school property.
So we were pretty aware that it was really a problem when it came to discrimination and just general overall negative attitudes towards queer youth in schools. I think it's generally widely known that some bullying is always going to occur towards queer individuals. But we really wanted to get solid evidence of what was happening and a good understanding of where or how youth are being discriminated against across various LGBTQ communities. And so we created a survey. We spent quite a bit of time going over, really thinking about which
We lost your audio, Natasha.
Fiona,
Yeah. Natasha, we can't hear your audio anymore. Can you maybe turn your camera off if you're having Wi-Fi issues? Great. Can you repeat what you said? Let's see if we can hear you now.
Yeah.
Okay, we can hear you.
Okay. So we wanted to see just how these issues apply to students, parents, and teachers, and what teachers knew about the subject, how parents were being impacted, and primarily it was, of course, student focused. So from there, we disseminated the survey once it was finalized amongst our various schools, and we found that 62.5% of transgender students surveyed said their teachers don't acknowledge their identities. So that could be pronoun usage or use of their names or just fully misgendering them. I would say that the main problem was teachers just not being aware of how to ask or how to know. And so obviously that can be a very invalidating issue and keep students from fully participating in class, as well as I think the most dangerous issue we came across was how transgender students, especially those who were gender nonconforming, felt a lot of discomfort around using gendered bathrooms, to the point where there was pretty extreme bullying and even assaults happening in the bathrooms, and a general stigma and bullying that couldn't really be turned into a numeric statistic, just many different experiences that were shared in the survey about anything ranging from discrimination by teachers or ignorance by teachers that had really affected people to a double standard in PDA rules for queer couples, or anything from really something extreme to microaggressions that added up. And we found it really important to understand these issues so that we could know how to help.
So moving on, this is, our data collection process was in the early 2020 stage. I guess I'd think of it as pre-pandemic. So first 3 months or so, 2.5 months of 2020, and then moving into the spring, as things started to move online, we've been communicating with people at our schools, our counselors, our teachers, our principals, your school superintendent, trying to figure out a way for us to get involved and make a positive impact in our communities. And then we kind of had an opportunity fall into our laps. So in the spring of last year, our school board, the TUSC school board, voted in place the family life curriculum, and our adult leader, Natalie, who's on this call, told us about it. And so basically, this is a somewhat controversial curriculum, and parents are not very happy about it. But one day, it got passed. And so this part of this curriculum was involved a school counselor training that was specific to that curriculum, that came as a result of the passage of that curriculum, that was regarding the exact topic we were focusing on, which was the discrimination against and the lack of equity and inclusion for LGBTQ plus students in our schools. So this training was led by University of Arizona professors, and so essentially our process was we asked, first we spoke to Fiona actually was in contact with our school superintendent, and even prior to this passing, and then when it passed, she initiated and asked him about if we could get involved in this in some way. He referred us to one of the members of our school board who was very involved with this, and she was very enthusiastic about the work we were doing and wanted us to get involved. So she referred us to the professors at the University of Arizona who were leading the curriculum, or were leading the training. And so we got in contact with them. And so now we're the timeline speaking, we're moving into last summer. So this is in July, largely, of last summer. We're in contact with these University of Arizona professors, and they already had the training planned, but they loved what we were doing as well. And so we worked with them over multiple meetings to try to figure out a way that our work could be incorporated, because the belief was that students presenting these problems sounds more real, and it's more likely to have an impact, and is more almost more reliable in a sense, and counselors are more likely to take notice, we believe, than if it was coming from adults who weren't really part of our school district. And the U of A professors were in agreement, and so we got involved with their training, and they found a way to incorporate some slides that we wanted to present, and so in that we presented. So then in July of last year, we presented multiple slides in the training about our research and about what we hoped, from a student perspective, what we hoped TUSC staff could do. And so this training was for TUSC counselors, the idea was that they would relay the information to staff at the school. And so we essentially communicated what we hoped from our perspective could be done moving into this school year, 2020 to 2021. So we asked, about making spaces more accepting and respecting of our LGBTQ plus students, and basically just everyone in our community. We also made a note to point out just mental health as a whole was a problem. I mean, people were not doing in responding to our survey. We found that among all students, their mental people were having struggles with mental health. So we made a point that there are things that we really wanted our counselors to get done about LGBTQ plus discrimination and about the general well-being of students in our schools. And then after that, a member, Fiona and I, and another member of our club named AJ, who's not on this call, we got reached out to by our school counselor because we were all at the same high school last year. And he asked if we could present, our counselors were planning on relaying the information to all the school staff at another meeting. And he asked us if we could help with their presentation. So we gladly joined in and presented the exact same thing. And we believe that we made an impact. We saw small changes and asking in terms of, for example, I had many of my teachers ask for pronouns, which was something that hadn't happened at all before. So we feel as though we made a positive impact. And then moving into this year, our focus began to change a bit. And Natasha can touch on that now.
Yeah, so this year, I would say that we kind of stayed with the same inherent goal of our project, and just kind of shifted the focus. So I kind of took the lead in this, and we worked together and decided that we really knew there was work to do in 4-H specifically, and we wanted to take that on. So kind of our project last year was very focused on the fact that school, is essentially for young people where they spend most of their time other than home. And a lot of young queer people, unfortunately, aren't accepted at home. So it's very important to be accepted at school. And in choosing to focus on 4-H, it wasn't only that we are a 4-H program, but that 4-H serves that purpose as well, especially for young queer people in rural communities. And we wanted to work on making 4-H an inclusive space and an uplifting space, because that can be so life-changing to young people. So we kind of talked through what rules and practices might be incidentally discriminatory, and what kind of attitudes and language might be not fostering as inclusive of an environment as we want. And so we've spent the last since about September working towards creating a training such as what we had for counselors, but student-led for 4-H staff. So kind of the main struggle we've had in doing this is the pushback that we have gotten from some 4-H volunteers, and kind of just really seeing the fear that goes hand in hand when it comes to queer discrimination, and the fear mongering that happens about young queer people just trying to live their lives. And so that's something we've really had to learn to push through, and we've had to think a lot about how can we support these youth in a way that respects everyone in the situation, where everyone feels respected. And how can we create a conversation that isn't accusatory, and a conversation that's effective in making people want to be inclusive? Because regardless of the fact that it is right to treat queer people with respect, and that is a necessity, people need to feel like their opinions are being respected. And so that's kind of been the biggest struggle for us, but we're very passionate about this work, so it has definitely been worth it.
All right, so first, we just kind of wanted to say, I mean, a few things that are something that each of us is kind of looking forward to moving forward. So I know personally speaking, I'm a graduating high school senior this year, but I want to stay involved, and I'm looking forward to kind of, you know, as Natasha talked about, our 4-H involvement. It's only picking up speed, and I'm really excited to see where that takes us, because it's a very prominent problem in our 4-H community, and I want to. I'm excited to continue to help.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Natasha.
Yeah, for me as well, I'm just really excited to continue this project and to kind of leave something behind in 4-H.
Yeah, going off of what Ben said, as they said in the introductions, I'm technically not a 4-H member anymore because I'm in college and I aged out, but I'm really excited to really improve and see what differences we can make in 4-H. You know, maybe we go from what we're doing with the 4-H volunteers and the 4-H staff and start working towards adding some other sort of inclusive element in 4-H. Like, I don't know what it's going to be because this project constantly surprises me. Like, I didn't see that we would be doing this in 4-H, but here we are, here I am, and I'm excited to see where it goes next year. And
so I think now we were going to have Sienna give her presentation, and then we can save any questions and discussion for after that. So I think we're going to go ahead and pass it off to Sienna now. You're muted, Sienna.
Sorry about that. Okay, I'm going to share my screen really quickly. Figure out which window this is. Sorry, 1 minute. Having some technical difficulties here. All right, there we go. All right, so what we are talking about is taking that information that the presenters were just talking about and using it to create a space, a community space for LGBTQ teens. Those problems obviously are not isolated to one place, and they're very much present here in Bozeman. So with that in mind, we can see that according to the Human Rights Campaign's 2018 LGBTQ youth report, 48% of LGBTQ youth out to their parents say their families make them feel bad for being LGBTQ. I don't need to go through all of these statistics, but you can see that similarly, we saw a lot of problems all across the country. And whoops. According to the Trevor Project's LGBTQ Youth Mental Health Survey from 2020, 6 out of 10 LGBTQ youth said someone has attempted to convince them to change their sexual orientation or gender identity. 12% of those who reported at least one in-person LGBTQ affirming space attempted suicide in the past year, compared to 20% of LGBTQ without in-person LGBTQ affirming spaces. And 46% of LGBTQ youth report wanting counseling from a mental health professional, but were unable to receive it in the past 12 months. So LGBTQ teens face a lack of acceptance and pressure to change, so they essentially need mental health resources and safe spaces in which they can be recognized, accepted, and affirmed. And then why we need it now. Nationally, 86% of LGBTQ youth say recent politics have negatively impacted their well-being, and Montana's legislature in particular has introduced multiple anti-LGBTQ bills this session, some specifically targeting young people. So HB 112 requires student athletes to compete under their sex assigned at birth. And HB 427 bars physicians from providing or referring gender affirming surgeries to minors. So in particular, right now, there are a lot of attacks against LGBTQ youth, which makes that need for support even more important than ever. And then LGBTQ youth also face a full spectrum of needs. Some teens need support for meeting basic needs like food and clothing, while other people might just be looking for a place to relax, hang out, and meet new people. And all of those needs are valid, and all of those needs need to be met within a community. So the goal of a support center like the one we're looking at here is to provide assistance to teens across that spectrum, whether that's through direct assistance provided at the center itself or connection to other resources. So the resources we hope to provide with this project, when we're looking at immediate goals, a safe space for LGBTQ teenagers to gather after school and be themselves with accepting peers, a fun environment with games, movie nights, and other activities, snacks, and possibly brown bag meals for kids experiencing homelessness, resources and literature to help teenagers find support, jobs, scholarships, and all of those other things that aren't necessarily as acceptable to LGBTQ teens, and a student leadership group to head outreach and plan activities. And then we also have some long-term goals that we'd really like to achieve. Like a part-time counselor present for by-appointment counseling, leadership training for teenagers, educator workshops to help teachers create safe spaces, and support groups for parents and LGBTQ adults. And those are some things that we're looking at in the long term that would also be incredibly valuable for the community. So what we expect to see, improved social connectivity, sense of belonging, and better educational outcomes, and ultimately hope. So then, of course, how do we make this happen? We need people involved. We need community members who want to get involved in getting this off the ground, ideally members of the LGBTQ community, grant writers, fundraisers, creative minds, and a founding teen leadership group. That's especially important in having this be a community-led project by the people who need it most. Volunteers to provide an adult presence, mental health providers interested in donating time, and community partners to help with funding, food and material donations, and leadership training. So what we need beyond that is just a home. That's something that we're looking around in the community. It doesn't need to be a big space. What we're looking at right now is just somewhere that we can be set up in, that we can have regular meetings, and that sort of thing. And we're looking at a shared space at first. The goal is to someday have a house that is ours, but it would definitely be a shared space at first. And that brings us to funding, everyone's favorite thing to talk about. We definitely need, we're looking for grants, particularly grants for youth-led projects like this, and fundraising and donations as well. So that brings us to whether people have any questions, comments, advice, and especially volunteers. Again, like I said, we need volunteers from the community in particular, and then anyone who's interested in donating time or giving advice and helping us get the project off the ground. You can see my email right here, and I will put that in the chat as well. And that is what we have.
So now we were just hoping to open up this for questions and discussion. So we would love it if you all could share your thoughts and ideas and any questions you have with these young people. And then we can potentially talk through some of the issues that we're dealing with and share stories and ideas about how we move forward in this direction. So if anybody wants to chime in with any questions, now would be a great time.
Sienna, I am wondering who you have already approached here in Bozeman with this idea, as far as any other community organizations, any businesses, or are you just really on the ground floor?
A little bit, yeah. We've definitely reached out to a couple of places about leadership and about getting somewhere, getting a location. And we haven't gotten anywhere that's for sure yes. Haven. Okay, and Haven, once their new center is open, has said that they would probably have a space for us. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
Erin, I see that you put something in the chat. Would you be willing to unmute and share your experiences as well?
Sure. I'm Aaron Myers. I'm a 4-H coordinator in West Michigan. I'm part of a group, and I actually see several of my group are on the Zoom call on the Zoom right now. We are part of a collection of Michigan State University Extension staff that are working towards providing more affirming and inclusive programming in Michigan 4-H, as well as within Michigan State University Extension itself. And we are currently working towards developing a statewide GSA program, and are currently developing a teen leadership committee, and are I think making pretty good strides towards making this a successful go. Our ultimate goal is if we can get the state program up and running and successful, we want to do this also on a much more local level too. And it's really just our belief that if 4-H is going to presume or is going to claim to be an organization that is for everybody, no matter what, there's a lot we need to do to own up to that. And if we're not, or if people aren't willing to own up to that, then we need to stop claiming to be.
I completely agree with you, Aaron, and I think my colleague Peter Hooper, who's on here, would also agree with you. We, and Peter in particular, has had considerable pushback in Arizona, not really from our administration necessarily, but from our volunteers and from our stakeholders. And there is active resistance as we speak to things like just adding other to our application on the gender question, things like that. And we are in the middle of trying to navigate all of that. And it is very difficult and very frustrating. And I think it just goes to show that this work needs to continue and it needs to grow. I think we need to be talking about this issue, especially in 4-H, more, and highlighting where equity and inclusivity are not happening. I know that at our university, we have very clear guidelines on equity and inclusivity and what is expected at the University of Arizona. And I can tell you it's not happening in 4-H. So there is a disconnect between 4-H and the University of Arizona. And so we're working on that, and we're trying to deal with that. So we have some very deep-seated issues that that need to be addressed. And if Peter wants to add anything to that, I think that, I don't know if you have anything else to add, Peter, with your experiences. He's the one who's lost his volunteers over this. So so that's where we're at right now with this. So we feel like the work that these young people are doing and highlighting is really, really important.
Thanks, Natalie. I don't really have a whole lot to add to this other than the folks who have left have been loud, but the folks who have left have been wrong. And so it's okay for me to get past that, you know. I see a lot of like what Ben was talking about with his own story as far as being a cisgender male or heterosexual male. It's easy for me to be supportive. You know, it's easy for me to put my neck out because I don't have anything really to lose with that, you know. So the tough part is finding the way to reach the people who need to be reached and to continue to build a program that is more accepting and is more inclusive, diverse, and equitable in everything that we do. And it's an uphill battle, but it's a battle that I feel I need to take on, because if it's not, it's not going to happen, you know? So Ben, I really appreciated what you said at the beginning.
Yeah, I just think it's important. I mean, you know, being an ally is, I think it's crucial. I mean, we, you know, I don't know if there's anybody, any other allies on the call, but I just think it's a key part. It's a key part of this fight, and we want to support our LGBTQ identifying peers and colleagues and such as much as possible. So, yeah, I want to, yeah, really important.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And I wanted to address Jasper's comment that was in the chat. So I would say, well, I was 16 when I got involved with this. So, and 15 when I kind of started getting into activism, but with this project, it was, yeah, my junior year. So I would say that if you want to do something, if you feel like there is something that you want to change, I know it's cliche, but you absolutely have the power to do that. And I think your primary connection are going to be other people who feel the same way. And I know you said that you live in a conservative area. So I would say that it can be as small as, you know, one other queer person at your school and you start a GSA. You know, it can be you find a club that meets over Zoom once a month and you start doing that. It, you know, and it can be just little forms of community engagement. And, you know, or you could, you know, you can start big too. If you have something where you're like, this is a problem in my community, I think this is a solution, then start researching, start figuring out what you can do, and then find, you know, allies, other queer people who are going to help you reach that. So I would just say that don't doubt that what you want to get done in your community is possible. Know that there is a struggle to it, but when you find those other people who feel the same way, and I have no doubt that you will, band together with them and figure out a problem that you want to solve. And yeah, I would say just kind of um, you don't have to wait for someone else to start something. Like you can, you know, you can start a club at your school, or you can just start having Zoom meetings with people and try to make a plan about something, or, you know, that kind of thing, where like just start one thing and work your way up.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, I got involved with the high school club, the Sexuality and Gender Alliance, when I was a freshman in high school, and I started getting really passionate about politics and that kind of thing around 8th grade. So it's definitely something I've been trying to engage with for a while. I guess the first thing I would say, just because you're saying you live in a pretty conservative area, is make sure that you're putting your safety first, because that's something that you always need to consider, regardless of how sucky it feels. It's always important to make sure that you're not putting yourself or anyone else in a position that is going to put you in danger. But beyond that, I would absolutely agree with everything that was just said. And I would also say if you don't feel comfortable, if there isn't already the existing infrastructure, you can also do stuff that will help LGBTQ people with stuff that is already existing. So things like clothing drives, for example, can be really, really, really helpful for transgender children and teens. Anything that helps people who are living in poverty or people who are homeless is also going to help LGBTQ people, because obviously we're disproportionately impacted by those issues. So there's a whole spectrum of things that you can do depending on what you're comfortable with, depending on what resources you have available to you. So yeah, that's just what I would add to that.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Sorry, I just want to add one more thing. And that's going off of what Sienna said about considering your safety. Absolutely. I did live in a very conservative rural area for a period of time. So I do very much understand that. And, like, safety also means that your emotional safety, because this work is so empowering, but there are days when it hurts, and that's definitely something to acknowledge, especially if you're in that kind of situation, is, what's worth it to you right now. And that doesn't have to be the biggest thing. But I would also say on that note that if you don't feel that it's safe to you emotionally or otherwise to get out and do that work, activism isn't just having some super successful project or whatever. It's also, buying a book on queer history, or, starting a Discord for people of the same identity as you, or, it can be these little things that are little acts of rebellion in our society. Because that's also how I really got into queer activism, is learning about queer history and understanding the issues that affect me on a broader scale. So even just starting there, like, that is, activism.
And I can just add too that I feel like, based on my perceptions, that a lot of the problems are kind of seated with the adults, the parents. And so I think that oftentimes the youth perspective is very different than the adult perspective. And that's why, but oftentimes the adults try to speak for the youth and they think they're speaking correctly, and they often aren't. And so that's why it's really important for the youth to actually speak up and voice their beliefs and their concerns around these types of issues, to make known that that they support equity and inclusivity in these types of movements, and that they disagree with much of what's being kind of pushed at the adult level. And I think that the youth voice ends up being even more powerful than any adults, especially in spaces where youth are, schools, 4-H, things like that. So I do think it's important to think about your safety first, and that is unfortunately a concern, depending on where you live. And you should definitely think about that first. But if you do feel comfortable in speaking up, I think that if there are any other youth on here, or if you work with youth, just consider that as that, the kids that Fiona and Ben and Natasha, I started the Youth Action Project not ever considering that LGBTQ inclusivity would be the topic that we would be focusing on. I was doing healthy living work, and we're focused on eating well and fitness and those types of things. And it turned out, when I asked them and gave them the opportunity to decide what they wanted to focus on, it was very different than what I would have chosen. So it's really, really important for professionals who are working with kids to allow them the freedom to voice what is most concerning for them. And I've been doing this work for 9 years, and I've never worked with a group that was so vested in anything than this group. And that, I believe, that is because they led it. They chose it. It was their passion. So it's now been like over 1.5 years, and they're still at this, doing this great work and trying to get out there and spreading the word and encouraging others to do the same. And even though they're all going to be off to college next year, that they are committed to continuing it, and they want to do a training for our volunteers and staff in the fall. And we can only hope that that will actually be allowed to happen. So that's just my encouragement to you all who, if you work with young people, to consider allowing them that freedom. Does anybody else have any other questions? I'm trying to keep up with the chat, but if you put something in the chat, feel free and say it out loud if you'd like to discuss it.
So Natalie, I put something in the chat that I think got a little buried. I'm just wondering if anyone on the call has some tips for Sienna and Sarah that for funding that are not extension and 4-H related. If they know of any, you know, foundations or grants that might be interested in the type of work that they're interested in doing. So
I think this is an excellent question, and this is Cami, and I work at Bridger Care, the Family Planning Clinic in Bozeman. And I don't know for sure. I'd be happy to talk to our development team, but we definitely know of foundations that have given money to us in the past for some of the LGBTQ plus work that we're doing that I think we could pass the names on to you, Sienna, which I would love to do. But also looking to, because we have a high school group of teens that teaches about sex ed, and so some funding we've also received is specifically for like youth centric groups and not necessarily youth centric LGBTQ plus groups, but I don't know. I don't promise anything. I'll obviously go looking, and I have your email, which is fabulous. But maybe there might be a few foundations that we know of that we can pass on to you.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Of course, you're doing amazing work.
And I will tell you, Sienna, in Tucson, we do have a place similar to what you're talking about. It took years to actually come about, and it was sponsored by the Southern Arizona AIDS Foundation. So you might look at your local AIDS Foundation to see if they would be able to provide funding for your center.
Silly thought, have you guys started a GoFundMe even?
I actually do not think so.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, Natalie, I did have something I wanted to mention. It doesn't really address funding, but for something that they might be interested in or implementing as part of their programming. Something that I've been working on a lot recently that I'm really shocked and surprised to find just how well it works is in my county. I've been researching a lot involving Dungeons and Dragons of all things, and that is actually surprisingly a very strong LGBTQIA resource that I've been finding a lot of people or have been implementing, given that it really enables youth that may be questioning their gender identity or wanting to explore it. It really provides them with kind of a safe and very inclusive environment to do it in. So just as a suggestion that that might help bring your youth into the program, or consider looking into that.
That's really interesting. I've never heard of that, so that's totally new to me. I'm going to look into that. Thanks for sharing.
I'm putting in the chat. Here's an article that I've actually come across that addresses some of it.
Great, thank you. All right, does anybody else have any other questions, comments?
We have some in the chat. I can read, I think, ones that we might have not covered yet, if I can kind of read them from the order they came in. This is Natalie and team. I would love to hear more about you incorporated youth participatory action research into your work. Assuming I heard / read correctly that you engage in YPAR work, and I really like YPAR and love the idea of LGBTQ plus equity focus. If any of us want to touch on that really quick.
I guess I can. Yeah, I mean, there's a curriculum that's called Youth Participatory Action Research. It's out of, I think it's out of Berkeley. It was the guide that I used for a curriculum to do youth participatory project with kids, teenagers. And so I would recommend that you look for that curriculum. It's actually available for free if you just search it, Youth Participatory Action Research, YPAR, and Google, you will be able to access it completely. And it guides you through it. But I will say that if you do it, and you do it kind of as it's intended, that you kind of don't really, you don't really have a choice as to what's decided. So if you wanted to have a focus on LGBTQ topics, then you would have to kind of insert that as the kind of the overarching theme in what you're doing, because the idea of it is that you're teaching youth about doing research on a particular topic of their choosing, and then they utilize the research in order to try to create the change, which is what they did with this group. So I think it's a fantastic way to lead a project. I thought it was a really fun way to do a 4-H project. And it, like I said, it allowed them to really explore what was important to them. And so they were much more vested in it. But certainly you could, if you had a group of kids who were interested in this topic specifically, then you could stay within this theme, and then you could figure out through the YPAR project what the action is that you'd want to take. But the research piece of it too is pretty pivotal part of it, and it goes through the different types of research methodologies that can be used in order to collect data, or in our case, that kids collected data, but they also did looked for data, existing data, to back up their work. And I think for this particular topic, the thing that it was really, I believe, that can drive a lot of that change, or the kind of the way that we can convince people that this is an important topic and not just some fly by the seat of your pants thing that we want to start focusing on, is that it's really about mental health. And if you look at the statistics, as Sienna outlined, the Trevor Project is an excellent resource for that type of data and information on this, is that the youth who identify as LGBTQ plus experience much worse outcomes overall in everything, whether it be suicide, drug use, homelessness, depression, all the things. And so they are faring much worse in the mental health realm. And as we move forward with trying to focus more on mental health because of pandemic related issues, I could only imagine that will get worse. And so it's kind of important for us to keep in the forefront of our mind the why. And the why is that this type of discrimination is causing terrible outcomes for many, many youth throughout this country. So I think that we need to keep that in the forefront of our minds. And it looks like Nat was able to put the link to that curriculum in the chat. So thank you so much. That's great. And it's great that it's free.
Another key question that I think we should definitely touch on is how to build networks and increase support. If there's insight from those experienced on the call regarding community organizing. I think that's a very good question.
I mean, we got lucky because, we were already in a 4-H club, and we had a group of youth that wanted to join our project in our 4-H club. But I think Natasha's idea of creating like some sort of club within your school or something like that for a group of youth who are LGBTQIA plus minded would be a really great way to create a group of youth that are focused on these ideas, and then you could build a community surrounding them and then move forward with some sort of activism. If you're not a student, I maybe like some sort of parent club, or like if you have any like maybe in some sort of group that you're a part of, like maybe some sort of like choir or any sort of group that you're a part of, you could reach out and be like, hey, is anybody interested in this sort of idea? Maybe like friends, family, see anybody who's interested, reach out, and then sort of like try to build a network from there, just starting small and then seeing who wants to join.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I would say that the main resources for these types of connections would be obviously like local support in your area, like kind of resource hubs or those types of organizations. And then universities will a lot of the time have, queer centers, or, even just you could, if there's a university in your area, you could even just scroll through the following on the gender studies department and probably find people who would want to work with you. So definitely utilize the internet and think of new ways to utilize the internet. I would also say that there are a lot of, make sure you research and know which of these platforms are good and safe and regulated, but there are a lot of platforms like discords for queer communities, or something like, LGBTQ Arizona or something. But like I said, make sure those are safe and regulated.